And welcome back to Dodgers Dugout Live, the number one Dodgers podcast and Dodgers show on YouTube. And today, we've got a special guest. We've got Jason Sturman joining us. He, of course, is behind the must-see baseball documentary of the year. Just must-see documentary of the year, in my opinion. Homecoming, the Tokyo series. It premiered at the Egyptian Theater a few weeks ago. It's going to be available in theaters nationwide on February 23rd. Tickets are already on sale. The buzz is palpable. Go and see the trailer. It'll make you want to run through a brick wall, get you hyped for the season. Jason, first and foremost, congratulations on putting together this incredible production and a documentary that all Dodgers fans absolutely need to see.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're excited to talk about this because, I mean, the thing about Shohei Ohtani is he's one of those guys where it's like you see every day, you hang out with him for 6 to 7 months of the year, but it's like, who is he? What is he really like? And I think one of my favorite things about Shohei Ohtani with the Dodgers versus the Angels is, yes, he's on our team, so it feels like we're just a little more exposed to him, but it also feels like we just know more about him and he's opened up. Like he's got married. Everyone knows Decoy. There's been some ups and downs. The whole Ipe thing, it feels like we kind of got through with him. It just feels like more of a human, even though he's doing superhuman things. From your end, going through this project, what did you learn most about Shohei Ohtani, kind of the person, how he kind of blends that with being that superstar player?
Well, the interesting thing to me, and quite honestly, was the reason why I set out to go to Major League Baseball to ask about doing this film, was when Shohei came to the Dodgers and myself being a Dodgers fan, but also just kind of like being a filmmaker and looking at like the little things. I think the thing that always drew me to the question of like, where does this guy come from, was quite honestly, it's like the way Shohei approaches the game, even from his first at bat, right? The hat tip to the opposing manager, the respectful nature that he takes to the game. I use a perfect example of like the Padres game from last year where he got hit and he goes and plays peacemaker. And I think that only opened up the question of like, okay, he's approaching the game in a way that feels different. And where does this guy come from? Which also then opens it up to Yamamoto and Roki. And in the film, the Cubs are in as well. And you look at Shota and you look at Seiya, like they all kind of have this thing slightly different. And we, I think, are lucky enough to see them when they're at their peak, right? Like they're at their best. That's why they're in MLB. But they obviously had a whole career elsewhere. And that was obviously where they came from. And that's in Japan. So the reason to do this film was really kind of go ask that question and look for an answer. It only just so happened to be that like the Tokyo series, which was the opening day last year, gave us the perfect entry point for like a reason to go do it now. But to answer your question, the thing that I think was the most surprising is that the way that baseball is taught in Japan at the earliest age, 8 and 9 years old in their version of Little League, all of the things that we are seeing Shohei do, the way he approaches the game, that like respect your opponent, the way he will be a good teammate and go, I'll move down to 9th in the batting order if that helps. I'll go play outfield if that helps. Yamamoto coming in and putting his body on the line. All of those things are instilled in these kids when they start playing at the earliest age. And the thing that the movie ultimately reveals through the process of basically getting a peek into the world of especially Japanese Little League is they're not teaching these kids that like respect the game aspect for baseball purposes. It's for societal purposes. They will ultimately go like, our job is not to build better baseball players. It's to build better members of society. And like, once I saw that, now whenever I see any of those players, and especially Shohei on the field, it all kind of clicks.
Yeah, and it feels like it is a discipline. I mean, you heard the word Yaku Shonen. They talk about it over there. It's like the baseball boy, like guys that kind of are meant to and they're destined to be baseball players. But I mean, we talked about a little before the show how sumo wrestling is the national sport, but with the success of Team Japan and superstars that have emerged, I mean, going all the way back to Nomo and guys like that, we've seen the evolution with Hideki Matsui and, of course, Shohei Ohtani, arguably the best baseball player in the history of the game. Just how has that sport evolved into, it's kind of the official sport of Japan, almost feels like.
I think the interesting thing is, so there was a thing that happened where Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle and these people went over to Japan, and these players kind of like brought and presented the game. But it's interesting also because it's like the way that the Japanese seemingly approach every sport, hobby, craft, whatever it may be. If they're going to do something, they want to do it to perfection, right? Like, so there are people who say the best pizza they've ever had is not in Italy, it's in Japan. There are people who say the best glove that's made for baseball, the Mizuno factory in Japan, some will argue like that's where the best gloves or the best bats come from. And that's just from a craftsmanship standpoint. And so I think them falling in love with the game and then making it their own version and striving to be the best at it is just built into their DNA. Of course, that's the way that they were going to approach it. The interesting thing ultimately, though, is now we have these players who are playing at such a high level on such a big stage. Shohei Ohtani obviously being the number one person who fits that model. And you now have kids who are watching in Japan and seeing a version of themselves, right? Like, it's like, that's someone who looks like me, who came from where I came from, who can do this. So I think more kids are also being drawn into the idea of wanting to play baseball to try and strive to be in Major League Baseball and try and be at that level.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the impression I got seeing that trailer. I mean, the kid, say, I want to be the better than Shohei Ohtani, right? And I mean, just for someone to say that, it almost kind of gives you goosebumps a little bit, right? And I think that when you look at documentaries in general, like I remember Hoop Dreams, I think I saw somewhere they had 250 hours of footage, something like that, just kind of as far as the development of this whole production, just kind of what were the challenges that it presented, knowing that this is a very specific series and a moment really not just for Major League Baseball, but just for the entire sports world to have a guy at the peak of his powers playing for a World Series caliber team, a team that was coming off a World Series, just the way that they were. Like, I mean, just kind of what were the challenges going into this project?
The number one challenge that I had was I don't speak Japanese and I don't live in Japan. But my reason for wanting to do the film is exactly to help explore and be the eyes and ears of an audience. So if I was an expert in Japanese baseball, then I would be shaded in a way that is me presenting it as my POV. I wanted to come into this as someone who knew nothing and really like explore those questions and try and find those answers. So ideally, that's ultimately what that film will present to audiences when you see it. The other challenge was like, they're playing the games, right? It's a series of 2 games. It's opening day. They also played 2 exhibition games. Both the Cubs and the Dodgers each played an exhibition game against the Yomiuri Giants, which is the NPB team in Tokyo, and the Hanshin Tigers, which is the team in Osaka. So they also had an experience of kind of playing the locals, if you will, and that's exciting for fans who were able to witness that. The real challenges ultimately came from trying to find the storylines and the characters who really fulfill the idea of what baseball in Japan is. And that's from a cultural standpoint, a societal standpoint, a craftsmanship standpoint. The film is not a play-by-play of the 2 games in the Tokyo series. That's the entry point and the reason for being there. But really it is a much broader look at baseball in Japan. So we cover everything, again, like from Little League, but we also cover the master bats craftsman in a little town called Gifu, who oversees the making of all baseball bats for Mizuno. We went to Shohei's hometown in Oshu and met with what is arguably his number one fan in the world and has a shrine built to him, who's also a hairstylist. So it's in his salon in this one, basically, very small town. So it's not just what is the inning by inning, play by play of the series. It is really using that as an entry point to why go tell the story and find those answers now.
Yeah, I definitely want to tell the audience that anyone that thinks that they saw that game in 4K HD and watched the highlights and saw the recap of it, that's great, but this takes you to a much deeper level, and you can learn things about baseball in Japan, Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki, and just have a better understanding, kind of appreciation, I think, of how they go about their business on a daily basis. I was actually in the crowd for those exhibition games, and one of my takeaways, like, that was, as the kids say, a little more lit than the actual games against the Cubs, just because I felt like I was sitting with a band at a college football game, just like nonstop. Everything's disciplined. Like, the cheering was disciplined, right? It was just like nonstop. But also, what really stood out to me was the respect that the fans had when Shohei Ohtani was at the plate. You could hear a pin drop and every camera's out. It's completely silent. Just how could you even begin to describe the relationship that Shohei Ohtani in particular has with the fans of Japan? And he said that the Tokyo Dome, I forgot what interview it was, is one of his favorite places to play.
Yeah.
Just kind of that relationship and the pride they have that he is what he is.
I think pride is the key word, right? It gives them the ability of having someone who has left their country to go compete on the biggest stage, right? And the ability for that person to then come back home and play again in front of that crowd in person in a stadium that he's played in before, even in those exhibition games against teams that are in a league that he was massively successful in when he left to come to the US. I think that just feels like a moment that I think many Japanese fans especially thought they wouldn't be able to see. And it really encapsulates, I think, the idea of what that means for Japanese players going forward. And it's not just Ohtani. It's I think, when you look at everyone that's coming out of Japan now, and, now it feels like every year there's some major prospect, at least one that's coming out of Japan. I think it puts them on a much bigger stage and they feel the pride of them embracing this game, becoming massively successful at it. And where does that ultimately go? And it's the everyday kind of nature of a sport that they have reinvented in their own way, and seeing it be successful with someone like Shohei and be the face of that game to a large extent, I think goes back to what you said, pride. That's really what it comes down to. It's national pride.
And you mentioned Oshu, Japan, where he's from. We know Superman is from Krypton, and then we know that there's an origin story there. How do you think where he is from specifically in Japan has kind of shaped who he ultimately became as a player?
It's really interesting because being there and walking the streets, you get off the train and the train station has a very small museum and shrine to him. There's a golden hand that you can bet people will go up and shake. It's a mold of his hand. So it's interesting to see what it is like now versus what it would have been like when he was just, growing up and playing baseball there. It feels very small and humble. And it feels very opposite of what you would envision in Tokyo. It has that small town, almost kind of like very middle America vibe, but just the Japanese version of that. So I have to imagine there's an aspect of that shaped him by not being exposed to such a big, broad audience, not being in a major metropolitan city and growing up in Tokyo, which I think probably when we see him and he feels a little more humble, or he feels a little bit more respectful, or he's just kind of everyone goes Shohei's kind of goofy. And I feel like that probably is allowed because of where he came from and where he rose up from.
Yeah, and as far as his teammates, I mean, Shohei Ohtani in Japan, it's like Michael Jackson, Elvis, the Beatles, rolled into one. And I remember just being at those press conferences. He walks in, he's got his translator. He never feels overwhelmed. I mean, the way he walks onto the field, it's this big electric reaction, but he never seems to, at least externally, present himself as, oh, this is a lot, or I'm feeling uncomfortable by this. Just in your opinion, having this access and this exposure to him, how is he able to do this with all the fanfare surrounding him?
It's a great question, and quite honestly, I don't know that I have a really good answer, but it's not just Shohei, because it's even the other players, the American players that are on both the Dodgers and the Cubs saw what was happening with the massive amount of press that would converge on not just Ohtani, but also it's Yamamoto. Roki at that time had just signed with the Dodgers, and he had just come back, he'd just kind of come back to Japan from being there a month before. And again, on the other side, you have Shota Imanaga, who is incredibly popular there, and same as Seiya Suzuki. All of them have that same thing where it's they don't feel like the lights are too bright. They don't feel like they're being mobbed and don't have an ability to answer. They all are very calm and collective. So it's something that definitely they just understand it in a way that I think is really shocking to a lot of, especially the American players who witnessed it.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to interact with any of these players during this process, especially on the Dodgers side? And if so, was there anything that kind of stood out?
Some, I mean, the interesting thing is that there's so much press when you get into that stadium, and so everyone's always fighting for any second that they can get with those guys. And we really wanted to take a more voyeuristic approach anyways. We really wanted to feel as if we are either a member of the press or a member of the audience at any given time when we're in that stadium. The thing that was interesting to ultimately notice was, I think, the the kind of shock and awe from the American players who didn't necessarily realize how important and how huge the Japanese players are to that fan base, to that city. I mean, if you get off the plane, it's hard to miss Shohei's face in almost every direction that you look. There's areas of Shinjuku and areas, anywhere, quite honestly, that like he's on every billboard, he is on every screen, he's almost on every product. And I think that was that thing where it's like you can hear about it, but once you experience it, it's something very different.
Yeah, I remember you get off the plane, and then there's the big thing for the lotion, the facial lotion. Then you get into the cabin, and there's a screen there, and he's doing a mattress ad. Then you get out of the cab, and there's the Beats by Dr. Dre. You go by the New Balance store, and not only is the whole New Balance store Shohei Ohtani, they're literally piping the commercial music through the speakers. Like it was like literally you can't look anywhere without seeing the guy. I mean, I was trying to like explain to the audience, I mean, Taylor Swift. I mean, I don't know, like Michael Jordan back in the day wasn't like this. I mean, it's tough to even find anyone in America that you can even compare to just how ubiquitous it is to see Shohei in Japan. I mean, does anyone come to mind like to try to explain to fans that haven't been to Japan what that experience is like?
I think the closest thing is Taylor Swift, right? It's that thing where if people are even aware that he's in somewhere in public, it's why you really see him in public, because he wouldn't be able to go anywhere. There's a journalist who speaks in the film, and he has a good line where basically he says, at one point Shohei Ohtani had said he wants to be the most famous baseball player to walk down the street. And the irony of that is that he can't walk down the street because now he's too famous. And I think that's accurate. Like that he feels like it again. Yeah. It's like Michael Jackson. It's like Taylor Swift. It's one of those things where people lose their mind if you see it.
Yeah, and people too. I mean, I remember speaking to some Japanese media, when you ask them who's the second most famous person in Japan as far as athletes, it's Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And he is someone that wasn't afraid to play in the shadow of Shohei Ohtani. And ultimately, he's the guy that wins World Series MVP before Shohei Ohtani. Kind of talk about the contrasting kind of styles that way they handle themselves in Yoshi versus Ohtani.
I think that it all comes from the same mindset, which is it's about building a better team and being a better teammate, right? And so Yamamoto is in a position of doing whatever he can to help his team. That goes back to Little League. That's the way that they are taught how to play the game, right? It's not about self. It's about the team on a whole. And I think the beautiful thing about baseball is that you don't know who's going to be the guy at any given moment who steps into the box or steps onto the mound and makes the play. In basketball, it's very easy. It's like you watch the Lakers and you're like, the ball is going to go to Luka or LeBron, right? It's like in football, you know who the quarterback is, you know who he's going to be looking for if it's a pass, right? In baseball, it's just the luck of the draw, right? Who's the next three guys up at the top or the bottom of the inning, and that's where you all of a sudden get Miguel Rojas hits a home run. In game 7. And that's kind of the beauty. But going back to your question, I think the Japanese players embrace that in a very, very strong way, which allows them to not feel as if they can't find a way to contribute, whatever that way may be, right? And so, again, Yoshi putting his body on the line for the greater good of the team, that is just him, I think, tapping into what he was taught at the youngest age when he started playing this game.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And we're here with Jason Sturman, the director of the must-see sports documentary of the year, in my opinion, Homecoming, the Tokyo series. Now, Jason, from the Dodgers angle, just this whole project that really started decades ago, longer than people may realize. And Andrew Friedman came out and said they wanted to paint Japan blue. Dave Roberts, they want to paint Japan blue. And of course, the biggest domino was Shohei Ohtani and getting that into the fold. From the Dodgers angle, what they mean to Japan. I mean, the Yankees were big over there, of course, with Matsui. And you talk about seeing Shohei everywhere. One thing that stood out to me was seeing the interlocking LA logo in Dodger blue everywhere. What can you say about what this has meant for the Dodgers as a franchise to have these Japanese superstars in Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Rogi Sasaki, and Shohei Ohtani represent Dodger blue?
I think it's and also with the success of the way that the Dodgers have played over the past few years, especially also, it feeds right back into that pride angle, right? Like the players are leaving, they're going to the US and they're playing for a team that is now winning World Series. that to them feels like they're linked together from a fan base, right? Like it's like following your favorite college player that then goes and is massively successful in the NFL. It's a slight kind of version of that. The interesting thing growing up in LA and being a Dodgers fan my whole life is the unifying factor of now this very, very simple logo when you fly across the world. And the second I got off the plane, when I landed there to go film this, I got into a car and the driver didn't speak English, but he knew that I had come from Los Angeles because that's where my plane landed. And the only thing that we could basically talk about, he said LA, and we said LA, and he goes Dodgers. I said Dodgers, and he goes Ohtani, and it was like love Ohtani, and that was it. That felt like that would be like a friend for life. And so there's this interesting thing where we are almost the beneficiaries of what these guys are doing, right? Like they're making the world smaller in a good way. And I think that in today's world, I think that's a really amazing thing.
I think for Shohei too, I mean, just watching just the parts that you cover on the documentary is somehow, some way, even though everyone knows that he has to come through in these situations, like the dude hit a home run. Like he could have gone 0 for 8 and it would have been like, fine, it's okay. It's baseball. But somehow, some way, I think for him, he knows he has to come through and he could fail and to be fine, but he found a way to hit a home run with that wall scraper the way he did. What do you remember from that moment specifically?
I think the thing that's interesting is I remember feeling that we take this guy for granted, right? Like there's an expectation that every single time he steps up, he's going to hit a home run. And I fear that it becomes that thing where it's like we become numb to it. And the expectation doesn't allow us to really embrace and celebrate how amazing what we're watching is. There's a scene in this film where the kid who's in Little League who says he wants to grow up and surpass Shohei Ohtani. There's a scene where he's talking to his father, and one of the things that his father says to him is that it's amazing that you live in a time where Shohei Ohtani is alive and you're able to see this in person. And he's like, I wasn't alive when Babe Ruth was playing, but I've read about it in history books, and it's incredible that someone who looks like you and comes from where you come from is doing all these things. And I think that's important to remember, right? Like it can become a little bit mundane watching history be made every single time this guy comes with bat, and every single time he's there, I think it's something that's special, and we should remember he's not going to be doing this forever. So it's really cherish every moment.
Yeah, we used to joke about that on the show. This planet Earth has been around for 4.53 billion years, and you somehow managed to exist at the same time that Shohei Ohtani was playing baseball. And we definitely, I think, do take it for granted. I mean, it's tough to even process what he's able to do on a baseball field. Jason, during this process, was there one moment, whether it be kind of on the film, without kind of spoiler alerts, or just during the process, that really sticks out that you kind of treasure for the rest of your career?
It's definitely the takeaway of all these storylines and the people who you meet along the way in the film having this same kind of unifying factor. And it really is the understanding that baseball and the way that they approach it from, again, like a societal standpoint, like the way that baseball and the rules of baseball and the way you play baseball and what it means to these people can mirror making everyday life a little bit better, and the way that they treat that in Japan. That to me, I take away and I go, like, we could use a little bit more of that, I think, here, right? Like we as a society could maybe use baseball to help us get through things, be respectful to our fellow citizens, our neighbors, all those things. It becomes very, very unifying over there. And I think that we could probably use a small percentage.
Yeah, as far as what fans will learn that they might not know, is it kind of what we talked about as far as just the dedication to the craft that these Japanese players have with the game of baseball, or just kind of what's something that maybe a Dodgers fan that thinks they know everything about Shohei Ohtani and the Tokyo series might learn that could surprise them?
If you're coming in specifically looking just to learn way more about Shohei specifically and the Dodgers specifically, you're going to come away with a much better understanding of what Japanese baseball is. And that's by design. I think the thing is that, like, there's plenty of people who can cover the game in a certain way, but I think getting a firsthand look of the way that Japanese baseball has been shaped and continues to shape these players will only help you understand and hopefully also respect what it is that we're all watching when we show up to a game.
Incredible stuff. So February 23rd in theaters, a must watch for all Dodgers fans, baseball fans, sports fans. Homecoming, the Tokyo series. All right, Jason, you've made it no secret that you grew up a Dodgers fan. You did a fantastic job covering those Chicago Cubs players.
今回も動画をご視聴いただき誠にありがとうございました。今回の内容はいかがでしたでしょうか。もしよろしければチャンネル登録と高評価をしていただけると今後の動画制作の励みになります。それではまた次回の動画でお会いしましょう。